Hi folks, HR Funk here. With something extremely cool, what I have here is a carbine conversion unit, or CCU, from Mech. What this does is allow you to take your standard pistol grip frame with its fire control and mount the CCU to it. You then have a pistol caliber carbine chambered for whatever cartridge your pistol was chambered for in the first place. So you get carbine length ballistics, but you're still using your standard handgun grip frame. Mech makes this for several different handguns. The 1911 is the one that I have here. They also make it for Glock pistols, and they make it for the Springfield Armory XD and XDM. And on top of that, they chamber these for a lot of different cartridges. Now you have all the standard cartridges like 45 ACP and 9mm and 40 Smith & Wesson, but also some that are a little bit more unusual like 460 Roland. So check the Mech website for all the different cartridges that are available for the CCU. But in this video, we're going to be taking a look at this one. It's chambered for the 45 ACP cartridge. I'll tell you about all of its features and characteristics here in the shop, and then we're going to head out to the range and see how it performs. So here we go. When you receive your Mech CCU, it comes to you in a plain brown box, which is fine with me. And when we open it up, we find instructions to go along with it. And inside is the CCU itself, along with some additional information. And with this one, I went ahead and ordered an optional muzzle brake, largely because I was curious to see just exactly how well this would work, so I'll be attaching this in just a little bit. Here is our first up-close look at the Mech carbine conversion unit. And the first thing I'll tell you about these units is that there are a ton of options available for these, and you can customize the unit to exactly the way you want it to be. In fact, there is an app on the Mech website to help you select all the different options, and there are everything from buttstock options to rail options to finish color options to muzzle device options. So the way I have this one set up is just the way I wanted to have it set up. But if you want to have yours set up a different way, there are all kinds of customizing features available. Just go to the Mech website and you can check all that out. So for this particular unit, I selected the adjustable length M4 style buttstock. This has the standard rail. I went with the mini quad rail. It does have a threaded barrel, and there's a thread protector on there that you can see. This is for the 45 ACP cartridge. These are straight blowback designs, and one thing I noticed when I was looking at this is there's a very hefty buffer right there to help keep down the recoil impulse, so that should be a nice thing when I start to actually shoot this. I'm going to grab a frame now and mount this so you can see what it looks like when it's all together. I was going to do that on camera, but Mech has their own video showing the assembly with the 1911 frame. So if I don't put that in this video, I don't have to worry about YouTube demonetizing the video or banning it or whatever, because they think I'm showing a modification, even though I'm actually just showing the assembly of this product the way it's supposed to be assembled. So in any case, for the actual assembly demonstration, go to the Mech website and you'll be able to find that there. But I'm going to put this together, and the next time you see it, it's going to have the 1911 frame installed. Here is the Mech carbine conversion unit installed on the frame of my TZOS US Army 1911 pistol. And there are a couple of things you need to be aware of with the frame that you're installing on the CCU. So long as you're using something that has standard government model 1911 dimensions, you should be fine. But if you have a pistol that deviates from that, you need to be aware that it may or may not work depending upon exactly what is different and how it differs from the government model dimensions. For example, some 1911s, especially 9mm 1911s, have a ramped barrel. You can use a frame with a ramped barrel, but you need to get an accessory from Mech in order to be able to adapt the CCU, or actually you're adapting the frame to work with the CCU. So keep that in mind. Also, if you have a 1911 that has a double action trigger system, that will not work with the CCU. The safety is something you need to be aware of. This is designed to work with a standard government model safety, and I'll see if I can get this closer so you can see what I'm trying to show you here. There is a recess right here, and when the safety is engaged, the top portion goes up inside that recess. If you have a safety that has an extended lever, there's not enough clearance for that to work properly. And I was originally going to use the frame for my Tizosh Raider pistol because the Cerakote color on that frame more closely matches that on the CCU, and I thought it would look good together. But that Raider pistol has an extended safety lever and I cannot engage it. The frame fits onto the CCU and otherwise everything functions properly. The trigger still works and everything else. But I cannot engage the thumb safety, and I did not want to use that frame without the ability to have the safety function the way it normally would. Interestingly, nothing about this changes the function of the grip safety. That still works properly. So you still have to have a good shooting grip in order to be able to fire the CCU, or I should say to be able to fire this firearm with the CCU installed. So keep that in mind. Go to the Mech website because it goes into extreme detail about all the dimensions and everything you need to be aware of to make sure the frame you're going to mount to the CCU is going to work properly. Here's a look at the starboard side of the CCU with the ejection port visible. And something to be aware of is that there is no last round bolt hold open with the CCU. I've installed an empty magazine in my grip frame here, and I'm going to pull back on the charging handle, and as you can see, even with the magazine in there, it does not lock open. You can physically lock it open if you need to, simply by pushing in on the charging handle so it goes into this recess that you see right there, and you can mechanically lock it to the rear to keep the bolt open if you need to, but it's not going to lock open automatically after you fire the last round. Here's a look at the CCU with that muzzle brake installed. I don't think I said it before, but the CCU has a 16¼ inch barrel, so it'll be interesting to see out at the range exactly what kind of velocity we get out of the 45 ACP cartridge coming out of a tube that long. Also, the CCU is rated for +P ammunition, but not +P+ or higher pressure ammunition than that. So you're okay with standard pressure and +P, but nothing above that level. As you all can see, I have arrived out at the range with the Mech CCU to do some shooting and see how it's going to perform. And right now I am just finishing up the zeroing process with this SIG red dot optic. I'm zeroing at a distance of 25 yards. And before I'm all done, I thought it might be fun to get some velocity data from the CCU to see exactly how it compares to the velocities we would be able to expect if we were shooting out of a handgun length barrel. I've got two types of ammunition that I'm going to test here. One is Federal 230 grain full metal jacket, 45 ACP. This has a rated velocity of 890 feet per second. I don't know what barrel length that's out of. I'm sure that's at least a 5-inch barrel. And also I've got House of Pain 45 230 grain jacketed hollow points. This has a rated velocity of 876 feet per second. So let's see how both of these perform out of the 16¼ inch barrel of the CCU. First up are 3 rounds of that Federal 230 grain FMJ ammunition. Let's see how it shoots. Interesting. We're not seeing velocity really very much higher than we would get out of a typical handgun, maybe just a few feet per second. I think that 890 feet per second that Federal has printed on this box was pretty optimistic. I'm going to have to play back the tape to see exactly what velocity I was getting, but the very last one is 850 feet per second, which is maybe just 20 feet per second more than I would expect out of this if I was shooting it out of a standard length 1911. Let's see what the House of Pain ammo does. So I did play back the recording with that Federal ammunition, and yes, those velocities were really right in line with about what I would expect out of a 5-inch 1911. So The 45 ACP is not a real high pressure cartridge, and it would appear that it's really topping out around 5 inches, and we're not getting much more velocity wise out of the longer barrel of the CCU, but certainly we're not getting any less. This time around, I've got 3 rounds of the hot munitions, 230 grain jacketed hollow points. These are going to be the first hollow points that I've fired through the CCU. Up to this point, I've just been using full metal jacket ammo, and it's been running perfectly. So let's see how the hollow points do. Okay, looked like that time around we might have gotten a little bit better velocity out of those JHPs. But again, not extremely high compared to what we'd expect out of a typical handgun. Let's go down range and take a look at what the accuracy looks like. So I hope you can see these. These 3 shots here are the first 3 that I fired with the Federal FMJs. I didn't bother to break out the tape measure, but these are about 2 inches center to center. I was aiming at the numeral 8 right here, so I was a little bit to the left. I made a slight sight correction after that. Second time around, I fired 3 shots into the head up here with the hot munitions, jacketed hollow points. And again, I've got about a 2-inch group center to center. I did not have as clear an aiming point when I was shooting up here as I had with the numeral 8 down here. So I don't think I'm still hitting to the left. These 2 look pretty good. This one I might have just allowed to drift a little bit as I was shooting. But overall, the accuracy is looking pretty decent. The trigger from that 1911 frame that I'm using is tremendous. We all know 1911s have good triggers. That pistol has quite a few rounds that are fired through it, so that trigger is well broken in. And I think the accuracy we're seeing here sort of bears that out. Again, velocity-wise, we're not seeing any tremendous increases in velocity, but we're getting good velocity. So let's go on now to some defensive drills and see what they look like. Next up, I'm going to be firing some controlled pairs from a distance of 5 yards. I'm going to start out using that Federal 230 grain FMJ ammunition, and up to this point, I have been using the OEM magazine that came with my TZOS US Army pistol, and as I said before, the functioning has been flawless. But as I work my way through these defensive drills, I'm going to start to use some other magazines. First up, I'm going to be using this magazine once more for the controlled pairs, but when I get to the next drill, I'm going to change to a different magazine, and we're just going to be testing the functioning all the way through these drills with different magazines and eventually different ammunition. No problem with the controlled pairs. The recoil impulse with the CCU is kind of different. It's hard to characterize. It feels sort of sharp, but there's not a lot of push. It's like it hits quickly, but there's not a lot behind it. And I think that big buffer that I talked about inside the CCU when we were back in the shop is doing a great job of soaking up the recoil, and the muzzle brake is doing a good job of preventing really any muzzle rise. And because of that, those controlled pairs were very, very easy. Now I'm going to move back to a distance of 7 yards, and we'll try some failure drills from there. This is going to be 2 shots to the body and 1 shot to the head. I'm also going to be switching magazines. Next up, I'm going to be using a Wilson 47D magazine, and we'll see how it functions. As I said, folks, failure drills from a distance of 7 yards. This time around, I'm still using that Federal 230 grain full metal jacket ammo, but I've swapped over to the Wilson 47D magazine. Let's see what happens here. Not looking too bad. All the body shots are staying in this center square. This one tried to make it out, but it broke the line, so that counts as a center square hit. Good shots here. This is my first headshot from my first trio of shots that I fired in this drill, and this was all me. I let that dot just drift a little too high the first time when I squeezed the trigger, and it went a little bit high. I think my bad guy would have still been having a pretty bad day. These 2 are very, very good. Just so you know, for my offset, I'm holding my dot right about here to bring these shots into this area that you see on the target. Next up is 5 shots from 15 yards, this time with a Checkmate magazine and that Federal ammo. I think I'll go for 5 headshots since I'm using a carbine instead of a handgun. That was easy. Next up is going to be 5 shots to the body from a distance of 25 yards. This time around, I've got the Wilson magazine once again, loaded up with 5 rounds of that Hot Munitions 230 grain JHP ammo. Let's see how this combo runs. Ran just fine. Can't see where the shots hit from here. I'll have to walk down range and find out. The accuracy that I'm getting out of the CCU shooting these defensive drills, all standing unsupported, is really, really impressive. I've got all 5 of those shots inside this center square. I could not see where they were hitting. I was just holding the dot right in this area, figuring that that was going to be pretty close, and I guessed right. And as we saw, the functioning with the Wilson magazine and the 230 grain Hot Munitions jacketed hollow points was perfect. Moment of truth, folks. Is the Mech CCU a 7-yard tack driver? In just a moment, we're going to find out. This time around, I've got the Checkmate magazine once again, loaded up with the Hot Munitions 230 grain jacketed hollow points. So in case you haven't been keeping track, when I finish these 3 rounds, that will be both types of ammunition that I brought with me through all 3 magazines. To this point, the functioning has been perfect. Let's see if it stays that way. Almost like cheating, folks. On the first shot, yes, the Mech CCU is a 7-yard tack driver. By the way, I'll fire out those last 2 shots just so we can finish the functioning check. Tried to put them on the target where you could see them. Maybe not the most perfect tack driving shot that I ever fired in my life, but keep in mind, with the mechanical offset, I'm holding my dot up here, and we see the advantage of the 45 caliber bullet. It was big enough that it caught that tack, and I still am going to qualify the CCU as a tack driver. Final thoughts on the Mech carbine conversion unit. The first thing I'll say is, beyond just the functioning and accuracy that you saw during this time out at the range, this thing's a lot of fun. The recoil impulse that I talked about earlier is certainly manageable. It's not punishing at all. And considering when I'm shooting full power 45 ACP ammo, it soaks it up quite well. It's a little on the heavy side. I didn't weigh it when we were back in the shop. I think if you look at the Mech website, it'll probably give you the weight on there. And also the muzzle brake, I'm sure, is helping out a little bit, but it's fun, it's easy to shoot. If you have someone who's recoil sensitive and normally doesn't like to shoot anything that is a large caliber, they might really enjoy this because it's very, very soft shooting. Beyond that, as we saw, it was completely reliable with every type of ammunition I had. Now, I only had 2 with me. Actually, no, that's not true. I started out my zeroing process with some 230 grain ball hand loads that I had. It ran those perfectly, it ran the Federal FMJs perfectly, and it ran the Hot Munitions JHPs perfectly. So no issue with functioning, even though I was using 3 different magazines, 3 different manufacturers. I don't think I mentioned it before, the OEM magazine that came with this US Army pistol was not marked, so I don't know who manufactured it. It is a GI style 7-round magazine. The Checkmate magazine and the Wilson magazine are both 8-round magazines, and I loaded them up to full capacity when I was working with them, and there was no issue whatsoever. The last round bolt hold open is something I noticed just because the bolt doesn't stay locked back after the final shot, but I've got other firearms that do that. It's just not that big a deal to me on this type of a firearm. If you have a handgun that you enjoy shooting, particularly if it has a trigger you like, and it's one of the handguns that works with the CCU, and you don't have a carbine or you don't have a pistol caliber carbine and you always wanted one, this thing really, really works very well. As I said, the accuracy is great. I think it's a fantastic item. Since it's not an actual firearm, it's just a component to a firearm. At least in my state, it can be shipped directly to my home. It doesn't have to go through an FFL, so that's nice. I can order it, have it shipped to me, take my handgun apart, attach the frame to the CCU, and I'm ready to go out shooting. And I've got now my carbine, and as you saw, whenever you're using a carbine and you get those 4 points of contact, this hand, your shoulder, and your cheek, you get much more stability when you're shooting, and it's easier to fire accurate shots quickly than it is if you're trying to fire those same drills with a handgun. In any case, that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you need more information on the Mech CCU, go by the Mech website and you can find all the information there. See you next time, folks, and until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.